We were on Kuf Gimel Lamed Aleph at the bottom at the two dots, 4 lines from the bottom, or 5 lines from the bottom. What? Kuf Gimel Lamed Aleph, 103A6. You should be right around there. So we mentioned we got up that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, after he died, before he died, he told his wife to keep the table set and the lamp filled and on, and the mita, which we translate as a bed. From there, it could be a couch that they sat on for Kulanu Mesubim, because he would come back after he was nifter on Friday night. So Archko brings out someone he would make kiddush. I don't know. It doesn't. There's a famous. Well, let's put it this way: if he made kiddush, he wouldn't eat. I mean, they're saying he came back in some form of a body. I don't know. I guess they because they're taking the end of the Gemara literally that we just said that 1 week a neighbor was there and the Amsa Shel Rebbe, the maidservant said Rebbe is coming, and then people knew that he was coming, so then he stopped coming. Uh, so I guess the fact that the Gemara said there that she said Rebbe is coming as if there was a person there, not that the Gemara says that, they assume there was a body. I find that very difficult to believe. And um, so we mentioned, I think, that there's an element of neshama yasera on Shabbos, and what the way that they usually explain neshama yasera is that the souls who are in Gehenna, who are getting punished, uh, they get a reprieve on Shabbos, and those neshamas come back to this world for Shabbos. So certainly, Rebbe was not uh, was not from the neshama yasera, because he wasn't a Russian, he wasn't getting punished. There's no doubt about that. Um, there's a famous, I don't know if I ever saw it inside though, a Chasam Sofer talking about Eliyahu Navi. That the Chasam Sofer said, so Eliyahu Navi went up alive to Shemayim. So there's a question. Rabbi Chanan Wasserman discusses it, and then Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky discusses it. It doesn't seem that he was aware. Maybe it was before Rabbi Chanan's thing was published, which I'm not sure, but uh, he also discusses what if Eliyahu Navi's wife was alive at the time, which was she allowed to get remarried or not? Because Eliyahu didn't die, but he wasn't on this world anymore. So is she considered an agona? Is she considered an almana? So it's an interesting uh, thing, but the question is, when Gemara say Eliyahu Navi came and said, well, when Eliyahu Navi came, is he a halach of a person, or is he a halach of a malach? What was his status? So the Chasam Sofer says if he came as a person, he had the status of a person, and if he would come as a malach, then he would have the status of a malach. I believe that's what the Chasam Sofer says. So, uh, but that was Eliyahu, who we know he went up alive, Bisara l'shamayim, and we know that Rebbe died because the Gemara just said the day that Rebbe died, he said this, and the fact that he came back, I don't know. So I don't know if Rebbe told his wife to set everything on Shabbos as if he was coming, so that she wouldn't be depressed or upset being an almana. That he told her to do everything the way it was. I don't know, but to say that Rebbe actually came back and they saw a body, uh, I have trouble understanding that. Well, the biggest problem is that he's the one that compiled a lot of the. But this is the Gemara telling us. So your question is, how did Moshe write the last 8 psukim if it says Vayamashra Moshe? So the Gemara Bava Basra talks about that in other places, and that's no. So that's not a problem. So I mean, so that's a serious question. So the Gemara mentions a few possibilities. Moshe Kasab B'Dema. So what does Dema mean? So one opinion is that Moshe wrote it in an ink that wasn't visible yet. It only became visible after a little bit of time. Or some say that it was given to Moshe, but he couldn't write it. Doesn't, and Yoshua wrote those psukim but it has the status of Chumash because it was transmitted to Moshe, but he couldn't write it. There's a couple other shatim. Those are some of the main shatim. But this is the Gemara is telling us. The Mishnah isn't telling us. The Mishnah isn't telling us this. Okay. And then a different problem that I don't understand from last week. Oh, no, we didn't get there yet. Okay, then the other thing is he mentioned that you have to honor your mother. So the Gemara says, but kabedes avicha v'yasimecha is a Torah law. Why would he have to remind them about it? So it says, well, it wasn't their mother. Their mother had died, and this was a different wife. So the Gemara says, but still, it's from Ve'es Imecha. There's a limud that Ve'es or Es Avicha Ve'es Imecha. It includes the wife of your father, who's even though she's not your mother, and the wife of the husband of your mother, even though she's not even though he's not your biological father. So, and the Vav Ve'es includes you have to respect your older brother. So the Gemara says that drasha only include that you have a obligation to honor them when they're alive. When your father is alive, then you'd have to honor his wife, or when your mother's still alive, you'd have to honor her husband. And along the same logic, you would say that if your father's alive, you would have to honor your older brother. And then there's a separate point is it only the oldest brother you have to honor, or would it be any brother who's older than you? Like if you're the youngest and you have three older brothers, you would have to respect each of them special because they're all older than you. So you could say, well, why should there be halacha to honor your? So on one hand, you could say, okay, if they're older than you would have to respect them. Doesn't matter if it's only the Bechor or any of them. But on the If it's any older, so there's a couple points. So one is if you have to honor your older brother, is it the oldest brother, or is it specifically the Bechor, or is it any older brother? So on one hand, you might say it's every older brother because they're older than you. But we know there's not exactly a halacha that you have to honor every person that's older than you. Obviously, mipnei seva takum, there's a obligation to respect elderly people, but I don't have to honor someone who's a day older than me or even 5 years older than me. It doesn't make them a zaken. So it's a little bit of a stretch to say that it would be all your brothers. Um, and what would be a specific reason that you should honor your oldest brother? It doesn't seem to be any reason why the oldest brother and not any other brother, unless there's some and then if it's the Bechor, only if it's the oldest brother, there's a good svara for that because let's say in regard to Yerusha, he gets the double portion. So to some extent, when there's though we'll see about this later on today also, though, it's not absolute, but for certain things we would consider the firstborn to be in place of the father. Not that he's replacing the father, but that the oldest, so if it's a Bechor, the oldest brother would be mamali makom of the aviv. There's a certain logic to that. Now, what's the logic that we say, or what is a logic? I think that from the Gemara, so before we talk about this, there's one very interesting thing. There's a famous Gemara that says that there was a certain person, Shimon ben, I forgot who, he would make a drasha for every S in the Torah. That every time the Torah says S, it's coming to include something and to teach us something. And then it said, when he got to the pasuk, Es Hashem Elokachatira, Es Hashem your God, you must be in awe of, or you must fear. He stopped. And they said, but you were darshaning all these things? He said, just like I receive merit for making all these drashas on the word Es, I'm going to get merit for not making a drasha on this pasuk. What can I add to this? Es Hashem Elokachatira, to fear God, to be in awe of God. What can I add? Until Rabbi Akiva came, and Rabbi Akiva came and said, Es Hashem Elokachatira, Lahavi or Larabos Talmid Chachamim, that we have an obligation to have awe and reverence of Talmid Chachamim. So Rabbi Akiva made the drasha for the word S over there. So some people mention was this S, was this drasha, these drashos of S to respect the father, respect the mother, to include your father's wife and your mother's husband, was that from Shimon HaMasuni? I think his name was Shimon HaMasuni. Uh, and they say, well, it doesn't mention his name, so it's probably just a different drasha. Now, we don't have a list nowadays, how many people would write the books of the list of all the drashas, but we don't have a list of the drashas that Shimon HaMasuni made these drashas. But that's just a very interesting thing about these S drashas that we have. So then, going little bit closer to back to our topic, it seems, the way I understand it, why do you have a special obligation to respect your husband's wife? Because your father's wife, because you have a kibbud av obligation to your father, so you have an obligation to honor her. It emanates from the respect that you have to give to your father. So why do you have to respect your mother's husband? Because you have an obligation to honor your mother. To honor him emanates from the obligation to honor your mother. So because these drushes, the Gemara says, "S your father to include the wife of your father, v'es imecha to include the husband of your mother, and the vav comes to include your older brother." I would say just like the obligation for your father's wife and your mother's husband emanates from your parent, I would say that to honor your brother, your older brother, emanates from the obligation to honor your father. It's obviously a much lower level, but to me, it would so from that, if it emanates from honoring your father, I would think it only would apply to the oldest brother, not all the brothers. That's what I think. So the Shulchan Aruch for this halacha about the brother says a person is obligated to honor Achiv Hagadol, the big brother. So not all of them. Whether he's his father's brother, whether he's a brother from the father's side only, or whether he's even a brother from the mother's side only. So it could be if his parents were both married before and had kids from before, he has two older brothers, one from the father's side and one from the mother's side. And even if the younger one is a Talmid Chacham and greater in Torah than the older brother, he still has to honor his older brother. But there is someone who argues on that. Now Moshe Rabbeinu certainly had great respect and reverence for Aaron, his brother, even though he was Moshe. Right. And then the previous halacha was this first Gemara: a person is obligated to honor the wife of his father, even though she's not his mother, as long as his husband, as long as his father is alive, and he's obligated to honor the husband of his mother as long as his mother is alive. But after their death, he's not obligated to respect them. However, it's a proper thing to honor them even after they die. Meaning, after the father dies, you should still honor his wife, even though you don't have an obligation. So. Um, so the halacha is that kibbud av v'em applies even after they die. You have to we still have to refer to our parents in a respectful way even after they died. So even though kibbud av v'em certainly applies after they die, these particular halachas about honoring the spouse, that only applies while they're alive. It seems there's an interesting source. So this is Rabbi Felder from Philadelphia, who was nifter 11 years ago. His father was the chief rabbi of Toronto. Wrote very, very interesting svarim, very clear to read and lots of sources. So in the Siddur, uh, so he mentions that the Ramban in Sefer Mitzvos talks about that. Where is this here? No, it's very interesting. Um, so even though you have to respect your father, but this drasha of S is only applies when they're still alive. Oh, so here what he says. With respect to honoring your older brother, the Ramban in Sefer HaMitzvos mentions that honoring your oldest brother is a part or a branch of the mitzvah of Kibbud Av V'Em. That it's the will of the father of the parents that the younger ones will respect the older ones. And then he mentions is it so Danny, according to the Chida brings from the Zohar and Kedoshim that it's only the chiyuv for the Bechor and not for if the oldest is a girl and then the oldest boy is not the Bechor, this halacha doesn't apply. But in a different sefer from the Chida, he mentions for Kisvei Hari that the third brother would also have to respect the second brother also. The Shulchan Aruch mentions that excuse me, not the Shulchan Aruch. The Pischei Teshuva mentions an opinion uh, that it doesn't apply to your older sister, but you still should retreat her with derech eretz. But I don't know, these halachos are a little interesting, so that's why I'm uh, speaking about them for a few minutes. Okay, so let's go on to the Gemara. So now we'll continue with the five lines up from the bottom on Kuf Gimel Amud Aleph, or okay, I was on the wrong page. In the Art Scroll side, it's 103A6, the bottom of the first column of the left-hand column. Yosef Chefani Shimon Efrasi, Hem Shimoni Bechai, Vehem Yisham Shimoni Bemosi. Yosef from Haifa and Shimon from Efrat. So either Efrat is a place. I mean, nowadays there's a city called Efrat, but that's probably not Efrat. But when we will read Rus, Amir Hashem in a few weeks, Amir Hashem with Ben David Mashiach, will we be around with us? We'll read in Yerushalayim. Um, so Elimelech was it Elimelech? I think it mentions Ephraim, and perhaps also by Shmuel's father, being Shmuel. So Ephraim might be a city in the land of Yehuda, or it's possible that Ephraim is some type of honorific, a certain importance. They called people Ephrati. So what does it mean? They served me while I was alive, and they will serve me when I die. Savar minei b'hadein almahu amar. People thought that Rebbe was saying in this world that they would be in charge of burying him. Keva dechazu dekadim arsaihu la'arsei. But once they saw that their coffins went out before Rebbe's coffin, so they died first, how could they serve him when he's dead? When he's dead, if they died before him? So people understood. Amri, they said, Shma mina lahu amahu dekamar. They said that Rebbe must be talking about in the Olam HaEmes. They're going to serve him in the world to come. The Haida Amar Hachi. So why did he talk about it? It's a very unusual thing. We don't talk about what happens all the MS. We don't even know what goes on. So why did Rebbe say this? The lo lemru milsa havai lahu. People, the reason that Rebbe said it, people shouldn't say that they did something wrong, and that's why they died. Vadhu idna nami zuchusud Rebbe hu da'ahani lahu. And the only reason that they lived this long was because the merit of Rebbe was such that it protected them. So people shouldn't think that they died because they were Rishaim. He mentioned that to show that Shimon and Yosef and Shimon were also going to go to Olam Haba. Now, there's other Gemaras that Rebbe suffered. He had very bad stomach pains for many years, and the Gemara talks about that the fact that he was suffering, it was a big kapara to other people, and there was a lot less suffering and a lot of less bad things that happened because Rebbe was suffering. So I guess the fact that we know that some of Rebbe's Yisurim, some of the sufferings that he did, helped people. Other people, I guess, they might think that his schus may have helped Yosef and Shimon also, but no, he said they didn't do anything wrong. It was their time. They didn't do anything sinful that caused them to die, and so he mentioned that. Okay, Amar lahan l'chachmei Israel. So another thing that Rebbe said, he told the Chachamim, bring in my sons. Now, to us, it seems a little bit strange. Why wouldn't this? Who would be with him? His family would be with him, and if he needed the Chachamim, he would tell Chachamim to come. But here, the Chachamim were with him, and so he told them, "Get my sons." Nichnasu. Oh no, I'm wrong. I read it wrong. Amar lahan. He told his sons, "L'chach Yisrael nitzarech." Well, I guess you could read it either way, but it makes more sense. He told his sons, "Get, I need the Chachmei Yisrael. Come bring them." Nichnasu etzlo. So then the Chachamim came to him. Nichnasu etzlo Chachmei Yisrael. Amar lahen. Rebbe told them, "Al tispeduni ba'ayaros. Do not give eulogies for me in the cities." Let's turn to Kuf Gimel Amud Beis. The Hoshivu Yeshiva la'achar shloshim yom, and resume learning Torah after 30 days, because there's halacha, the Nasi uh, who dies, do you have to stop the Batei Medrash close, the yeshivos close down? But he's saying make sure that they reopen after 30 days. Shimon b'ni Chacham, my son Shimon is a Chacham, and the Gemara is going to explain what he means by this. Gamliel b'ni Nasi, my son Gamliel will be the Nasi. Chanina bar Chama Yoshe Barosh, and Chanina bar Chama will sit in the head. So either it means should be the head of the yeshiva, or the Nasi sits, if the Sanhedrin is kind of like a half circle, the Nasi sits in front, and then there's the and then there would be the first seat, so to speak. Whether they sat or stood is there was a historical thing. It changed. By this time, they were sitting because that was after I believe when Rabbi Lazar ben Azariah, that was one of the things he changed to let they were able to sit down before they had to stand. But maybe it was someone else who changed it. But that was certainly before the time of Rebbe. So sit in the front would mean that he would be the greatest sage after the Nasi. Okay, so Savar Mina Mishum Tirchahu Amar. So why did he tell them not to eulogize in the cities? People thought it was that it shouldn't be to bother people. Keva dechazi to kasafti bekrachem v'ka'asu kuliyama. People, if they would only have been so. That he didn't want them to burden the people who lived in the small villages that they would have to come. But what happened? Kevan dechazi to kasafti bekrachim v'kasu kuliyama. When they only gave eulogies in the really big cities, the krachim, which are bigger than ayaros, v'kaasu kuliyama, and everyone came. The people came from the villages to hear the eulogies for Rebbe. Amru, people said, Shma mina mishum yikaruhu dekamar. Rebbe Yehuda Nasi was really saying it in a way that he was going to get more kavod. Now, it's very important to say, right? Don't think Rabbi Yehuda Nasi was looking for his own kavod. People thought that, as we just saw a few lines before, about people interpreted his words one way, and then after things happened the way they ended up happening, they reinterpreted what he must have meant. Why is it important? I don't know. But they were trying to learn from what he said, and then when the things that happened came out differently, they adjusted what he must have meant. I mean, there wasn't nevuah by that time anymore, but so it ended up he told them not to give hespedim for him in the ayaros, which are cities, but not as big as the krachim. But because they eulogized him in the krachim in the very big cities, the people from the villages ended up coming out of respect to Rebbe. Okay, Hoshivu Yeshiva La'achar Shloshim Yom. Make sure that they continue learning after 30 days of mourning. They'll start learning. The Ladi from Moshe Rabbeinu. Rebbe says, or people, whether it's, I don't know if this is Rebbe talking or it's how people are interpreting what Rebbe said. because 30 days wouldn't be greater than Moshe Rabbeinu. Diksiva Yifku b'nei Yisrael Moshe b'Arvos Moav Shoshim Yom. Bnei Yisrael cried for Moshe at Arvos Moav for 30 days. So for Moshe, he's saying you shouldn't. So Rabbi Yehuda Nasi said, "Don't eulogize me more than 30 days. I'm not greater than Moshe Rabbeinu." Plus in Yom and Saftin b'Yamama v'Leila. So for 30 days they gave Hespedim in the day and night. Mikan ve'elach saftu b'Yamama v'Garsi b'Leilia. From here on they gave Hespedim in the days and they learned at night. Oh, saftu b'Leila v'Garsi b'Yamama. Or they gave Hespedim at night and they learned in the day. Adasafti tracer yarche shata. Until in the end there were 12 months of eulogies, but 30 days was day and night, and then the remaining 11 months was either only in the day or only in the night. Now, Art Scroll quotes an interesting idea from the Chasam Sofer that if they would eulogize him, what when they studied Torah at night, they were moved to eulogize him the next day because they realized how much they were missing without someone of Rebbe's level anymore. And if they learned a day, they eulogized him that night out of realizing that Rebbe isn't alive anymore. We had a similar Gemara a long time ago in the Gemara in Brachos. I think that when Rav died, they were coming back and they said, "Could someone lead the Mezumin?" And they didn't remember the Hilchos Mezumin. And they said, "Look, Rav died. You doesn't even know how to answer the simple question." But it's a very demoralizing and depressing thing when the Rebbe passes away. It's psychologically it's very very difficult. Um, but another way you could learn it might depend on the machlokas when Rebbe composed the Mishnah. There is a machlokas rishonim between Rashi and I don't remember if it's the Rambam or I don't remember who the two opinions are, but one say Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. So the Rambam says, besides for not being able to write Torah Sheba'al Peh, you couldn't have a set Torah Sheba'al Peh. The fact that it's oral shows that it's not limited. So you couldn't say this is what Torah Sheba'al Peh is. So some opinion, so even having a orally transmitted text that this is what Torah Sheba'al Peh is was improper. And Rebbe says, no, we need to have it or else we're going to forget Torah because of the persecutions and the tzaros that we have. So there's a machlokas rishonim if when Rebbe composed the Mishnah, he only composed an oral Mishnah or he composed a written Mishnah. So you could say that these two lashonos in the Gemara that they learned all night, they gave Hespedim in the day and learned at night, or they learned in the day and gave Hespedim in the night, might depend what was how the Mishnah, the Torah Shabbat Peh, was composed by Rebbe. You could say that if it was an oral text, there's a special halacha that Torah Shabbat Peh is better. That nights were given for Torah Shabbat Peh. So if it was completely oral, they didn't need light, they didn't need candles. It was the best time to do it was at night. You didn't need it during the day. So if the Mishnah was composed as an oral text, that could be the reason why they gave the eulogies in the day, and then at night they didn't need to read anything. They recited the Torah Shabbat Peh and the Mishnah at night. And you could say that if Rebbe composed the Mishnah as a written text, so because he composed it as a written text, they needed light in order to read it. So they learned during the daytime. And at the nighttime, when it was dark, that's when they gave the eulogies. That could be, there's no hachrach to say that way, but you could explain these two opinions in those ways. How Yom Ashkafte the Rebbe, that day that Rebbe Ashkafte, it's the day he died, but it comes from the big sleep, I guess, because from Shchiva, from going to sleep. So, was there a movie or a book, something about the big sleep or something? I don't know why that term popped into my head. Nafka Baskol of Amra, Baskol came out and said, "Kol dehava bashkafti de Rebbe, who was ever there, and Rebbe comes, passes away, Mizumanhu l'chai olam haba, is invited and ready to come to a life of olam haba. Hahu koves kol yom haba asa kameh. There was a certain launderer, not a money launderer, but he washed clothes. Was by Rebbe every day. Hahu yomalo asa. That day, for some reason, he wasn't there. Kaven deshama hachi. When he heard that he missed out, he was always there at the house. That day he missed, and he missed the baskel that he was going to be included for Olam Haba. He went up to a roof, and he fell to the ground and died. Yatza baskel va'amra. A baskel came and said, "Afahu koves mezuman hu l'chai Olam Haba." That koves is also going to be to Olam Haba. So I don't understand exactly a few things about this Gemara. Uh, from Gemara's and Bava Metzia, it seems that women did the laundry, and there was a whole day. It took them a day. They'd go out by the river and they would soak the clothes and rub it with the stones and this and that. It was a whole big thing. So the fact that there is a male laundry guy is a little off the beaten path. Then other Meforshim talk about if this guy was really a tzaddik or not a tzaddik. So, uh, so some say that he wasn't a tzaddik, but but he was moved from the fact that he could have been Olam Haba if he would have been there. Didn't. So when he went up to the roof, it meant that he did a certain level of tshuva, and then v'nafal he didn't commit suicide because if he would have thrown himself off the roof. Committing suicide is a big avera. So they say, but that it wasn't literal that he went up to the roof, but he had feelings of tshuva, and so because he and so that part they don't take literally, but the fact that he fell off, they take literally. I don't know. So because of the tshuva that he had, he died. And some say he wasn't a Rasha, but he missed that day, and I guess he didn't commit suicide either, but he was upset that he missed it, and whether it's out of his preoccupation of being upset, he fell off the roof and died. And then the Baskel said he was also going to go. Okay. Shimon b'ni Chacham. So he said, "My son Shimon is going to be the Chacham." Micah Amar. What's he telling us, or what was he telling them that his son is the Chacham? So Hachi Kamar. Afabi Shimon b'ni Chacham, Gamliel b'ni Nasi. Even though Shimon, my son, is a big Chacham, but I want my son Gamliel to be the Nasi. Amar Levi. Levi said, "Trichel Meimar." Did he need to tell us this? Because Gamliel was the oldest one, he would have been the Nasi. Sarah Amar Rabbi Shimon bar Rebbi. Rabbi Shimon, the son of Rebbi, said to Levi, matlatach. It was needed for you and for your being crippled. Meaning, Levi was crippled. He had some type of problem with his foot or his feet. And so Shimon bar Rebbi, who was the Chacham, was mad that Levi respected uh, so my kashalach. What was difficult for Shimon ben Rebbe to speak so harshly to Levi? Hakra Kamar. We know a pasuk about this. There's a pasuk that the Malchus was given to Yehoram because he was the oldest son. So the oldest son would take over the position of the father. So Shimon, the son of Rebbe, would have known that even though he may have been a bigger chacham than his brother, but if the oldest son isn't unqualified, he would get the position. So in regard to this, we call this in halacha srara. Leadership positions go to the son. So usually these Torah positions also do, but even not Torah positions, if someone was appointed to be in charge of watering, in charge of the let's say the wells in Eretz Yisrael, so the Gemara in Kedushin says that that was a position that had authority, Srara, it seems that was transmitted from father to son. Gabbai Tzedakah maybe was also. I'm not so sure about that, but it's maybe. So there's a Gemara Megillah Daf Yud Gimel Amid Beis in Zvachim that they bring a different pasuk, not this pasuk from Yehoram, but that brings from a pasuk in Eov. And then Rashi in I think it's in Vayakel, HaKohen Tachta Mibanav. Rashi says that shows that that the son of the Kohen Gadol will become the next Kohen Gadol, and the Gemara in Yuma mentions that also. So in regard to Tosfos to Torah positions, though, does the son necessarily take over the Torah position? So the Aruch HaShulchan in Orach Chaim in Siman Nun Gimel says that there's no Yerusha for Torah. They'll find the highest quality, most qualified person. It does not have to be the son of uh, of the uh, of the person who had that position. Rabbi Chanan Wasserman uh, agreed with this. He quoted from a Gemara Bava Basra, Daf Yud Beis Amid Beis, that after Rav Ashi died, they did not make his son Rosh Hashiva. However, there's a Tosos in Brachos on Daf Dalet about Benayahu. So, Danny, you might appreciate this, but Benayahu ben Yehoyada, but this says that Tosos says that Yehoyada was the head of the Sanhedrin. So Benayahu was also. Tosos says Mistama Benayahu also was on the Sanhedrin. Since his father was on the Sanhedrin, he was also on the Sanhedrin. So it seems that he was mamalam. So Tosos seems to say that that a son would follow his position of a father um in even for a Torah position. And there is a Chasam Sofer or a Chaim Simon Yud Beis and Yud Gimel. Would the son necessarily get the father's position? And a big posek now with contemporary posek of Usher Weiss in the Parshas Pinchas of last year, he had his share of his weekly share was about this topic. Is there Yerusha in Rabbanos? Now, for here, it seems that there was no doubt that there would be, but the question is which son. But Mistama, if the oldest son isn't unqualified, the oldest son would take over. That's what the Gemara here is saying. So the Gemara says in the case, so if we have a pasuk from that Yehoram became the king because he was the Bechor, why was there any doubt that Shimon that Gamliel, the son of Rabbi, the son of Rebbi, would have been Nasi? Why wouldn't it be Nasi? So the Gemara says, Hahu mamalamakam avosav hayu. Yehoram was the one who was filling his father's shoes. He was the most qualified. But Rabbi Gamliel ain't malkam avosav hayu. But Rabbi Gamliel was not the most qualified of his brothers to fill his father's place. So therefore, Rebbi had to say that Gamliel was going to become the Nasi. Now we're on 103b3. Rebbi my time avad hachi. So why didn't Rebbi take the wisest of all his sons to be Nasi? It's true that he wasn't the most chacham of all of Rebbe's sons, but with fear of sin, he was the most qualified of Rebbe's sons to become the Nasi. Chanina bar Chama Yeshe Barosh. So then Rebbe said Chanina bar Chama will be at the head. Lo kiba Rabbi Chanina. Rabbi Chanina did not accept this. Shahaya Rabbi Afes got him shtei shanim umachza, because Rabbi Afes was 2.5 years older than him. So out of respect to Rabbi Afes, he did not want to accept this position. Yasef Rabbi Afes Beresha. So therefore, Rabbi Afes sat at the head, or the first among the Chachamim after the Nasi. Yasef Rabbi Chanina Avroi. So Rabbi Chanina stayed outside. He didn't go into the Beis Medrash. So Rashi says, I mean, he respected Rabbi Afes, but he felt that he was greater than Rabbi Afes, so he didn't want to be on a position lower than Rabbi Afes. So he didn't accept, he didn't argue, he didn't he didn't cause a ruckus. He stayed outside the Beis Medrash. The Asa Levi v'Yosef Gabe. So Levi, who was this son who Rabbi Shimon ben Rebbi spoke harshly about him and his crippledness a few lines above, sat outside the Beis Medrash with Rabbi Chanina. Nach Navshe Rabbi Afes. Then eventually Rabbi Afes died. V'yas Rabbi Chanina Bereshe. So Rabbi Chanina then took the position in the head the same way Rebbe had said. And now Levi didn't have anyone else to be with outside the Beis Medrash with. So he went to Bavel. So why didn't Levi come inside? What the problem? I don't know. Behind the Amrulay Rav, and that's why they told Rav, who was, oh, one more thing I missed. In regard to does the son take the father's position if it's a Torah position, or do we always look for the most qualified? So we have a book here about Rav Sadia Gaon by Professor Brody, and he writes in that book, these are notes that I have that I'm reading from here, that there was different, that in Surah and Pumbedisa, which was in Bavel, they had a different practice than in the yeshivos in Eretz Yisrael. In Eretz Yisrael, if the son was close enough, the son would take over as the Gaon, as the leader of the yeshiva. But in Surah and Pumbedisa and Bavel, the son did not necessarily take the father's position if he wasn't the most qualified to follow as the Gaon in as the head of the yeshiva. So that was an interesting source also. But we see that there's opinions both ways. If in Torah, a position of Torah, the son will take over the father. The son would take over the father's place, or not. And yeshivas nowadays, it probably doesn't apply because the yeshivas aren't exactly public institutions. So whoever's yeshiva it is probably has the right to decide who's going to be next. Yes, that happens a lot also. But in Israel, they find other shticks also. Let's say when the Beit Knesset Haramban, I mean the Chorva Shul was rebuilt in the old city, so the Rabbanut appointed someone to be the Rav, but someone else said, "We don't trust the Rabbanut. I'm the Rav," or so so each one, so there were different groups declared a different Rav of the Shul, and unfortunately, I don't know how much of a respect Kavod Torah it is. I don't know either of the parties anyway, but I remember this happened a while back. So Levi went down to Bavel. V'hainu damar leila Rav, and that's why they told Rav, who was in Bavel, Gav Rabba equal in Arda. A great man has arrived in Arda, Umitla, but he's crippled. V'darish klila shari, and he taught us that for an important woman to wear a certain type of hairpiece, a kalil is probably, it means a little crown type thing. So Art Scroll translated as a tiara. That's a very good translation. So the halacha is that women are not allowed to wear jewelry on Shabbos outside because we're worried that they're going to take it off to show someone else and they're going to carry it in the Rosh Hashanah. And we don't want them to, by mistake, carry in the Rosh Hashanah. So we tell them not to wear it. But this klil that they wore it would be beneath their dignity to take it off. So there's no worry, there's no concern that they're going to take it out, so they're allowed to wear it on Shabbos. That's what this great man paskind. Amar, so Levi said, Shma mina nachnafshi Rabbi Afis. So Rav learned that if Levi arrived, Rabbi Afis must have died. B'yasav Rabbi Chanina Bereishan, Rabbi Chanina has now taken over in the yeshiva. V'lahava Levi inish l'meisav gabei v'ka'asa. And Levi doesn't have a colleague, so he must have come down to Bava. Oh, so the article in the footnote says that Levi was equal to Rabbi Chanina in age and in wisdom. So he didn't go inside to the base medrash because he wasn't going to put himself underneath uh as himself underneath Rabbi Chanina. Rashi mentions Shabbos that Levi became crippled because he bowed down a certain way to Rebbi. So this tiara seemed to be something that was on their forehead, and it was connected from ear to ear. Rav Moshe told us, or he told me, that there was a certain student of Reb Chaim whose name was Reb Lev Forer, and then he uh, a very big gaon, and he somehow became the chief rabbi, I think, or the rabbi in Holyoke, Massachusetts. And when Rav Yashaber was still pretty recently to his time being in Boston, so the students who were learning by him, which it's possible that Rav Moshe's uncles, his mother's brothers, they weren't related yet because Rav Aaron and the Rebbitzin weren't married yet, but one or two of the brothers of Rebbitzin Soloveitchik, of Rebbitzin Ella Soloveitchik, were learning in Rav Yashaber's Kol in Boston. And somehow, I don't know if they went to Rav Lev Four, Rav Lev Four came, and he wanted to know what Rav Yashaber said. So they told over Rav Yashaber's share. So he asked a certain question or certain two questions. So the next day, the boys told Rav Yashaber the question on his share, and he said, "Lev Four is here." He knew from the question who must have asked the question. So it's just interesting that the way that that they told Rav, a great man came and he paskined that a woman to wear this tiara is permitted on Shabbos. So it must be Levi, and Levi must have come because Rav Afis must have died, so Rav Hanina must have become Rosh Hashiva, so he came. It's just but so in regard to the story about that Rav Yashaber knew that Reb Leib Four asked a question, whether it's something that he knew that Reb Leib Four had a certain sheet about it and he knew that, or sometimes the type of question, certain type of people ask certain types of questions. Whether it's that, I don't know, but it's a good story. The aim of Rabbi Chanina Nachnafi, Rabbi Afis Kid Yasef Lahavid Levi Inish Mesav Gabe. How come Rav concluded that Rav Afis must have died and Rav Chanina became Rosh Hashiva? Maybe Rav Chanina died and so Levi didn't have anyone to sit with anymore. Also, it's a little strange. Well, I don't know if it's a little strange. The Gemara says that Rav Chanina was older than Rav Af was younger than Rav Afes, but he didn't want to. But he stayed outside out of respect. Levi, obviously, if Levi and Rav Chanina were the same age, so Levi was younger than Rav Afes, So he must have held himself also that he was greater than Rav Afes, and he didn't want to be there. But I would say that there's a difference. When Rabbi Yehuda Nasi tells someone that they should be the Rosh, Reb Chanina would have had he I guess that it's lahavdil that he would give more gravitas to Reb Chanina, but Rabbi Yehuda Nasi didn't appoint Levi. But okay, so how come Rebbe felt? How come Rav in Bavel felt that Rabbi Afes died and Rabbi Chanina came? Why didn't he think that Rabbi Chanina died and Levi didn't have any colleague anymore? And that's why he came to Bavel. So Ibai Sema Levi Rabbi Afes Mekav Hayakaifle. Levi would have been a Talmud of Rav Afes. I mean, not that he was going to be a Talmud, but so if Rabbi Hanina would have died, Levi would have gone into the Beis Medrash, into the yeshiva to learn from Rav Afes. Even though Rashi in Shabbos says that Levi and Rabbi Hanina were the same age and the same level of learning, but according to this answer, the Gemara, uh, that wasn't true because Levi uh, would have sat to learn by Rav Afes, but not to Rabbi Hanina. V'ibay same, or you could say Kevan Shamar to Amar Rabbi Chanina Bar Chama Yeshe Barosh, since Rabbi had said Rabbi Chanina Bar Chama will be the Rosh, Losagi Lach Malach. He felt it was impossible that Rabbi Chanina would have died without becoming Rosh Hashiva first. If Rabbi Yehuda Nasi said it, it was going to happen. So it wouldn't be possible that Rabbi Chanina would die because that would go against what Rabbi Yehuda Nasi says. Tiksibahu b'tzadikim, because it says about tzadikim, passing an Eo, v'sigzar omer v'yakum lach. They will decree a certain saying, and it'll happen. V'yakum, it'll come up. So this is passing an Eov, and I looked in our notes. We learned it probably almost a year ago, around Daf Samachay. We spoke about this. This the topic that tzaddik can make a gzera and Hashem will fulfill it. So, um, I mean, the most common thing a Hasidic Rebbe says, "Oh, in a year you'll have a baby," and they have a baby. That's the most common thing. But there's a lot of sources about this, and this is one from this Gemara. Um, so I'll mention a couple core things in the next few lines. I have a lot of stuff to discuss. I really have stuff I don't understand about it, but just a few things about that tzaddik will make a gzera and Hashem will make it come true. Oops. Okay, we'll leave it here.